Good afternoon and welcome to the Health Leaders Workforce Talent and Development Now Online Summit. My name is Erica Randall and I'm the Content Director for Health Leaders, and I will serve as your moderator for this afternoon's session. Our closing panel session today is titled Strategic Approaches to Workforce Recruitment, sponsored by AMN Healthcare. Thank you to our sponsor for making today's program possible, and to you and our audience for participating. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping details. Our program this afternoon will be 60 minutes in length. Note that an on-demand version of this program will be available approximately one day after the completion of the event and can be accessed using the same login link that you used for the live program. To ensure that you can see all the content for the event, please maximize your event window and be sure to adjust your computer volume settings or your PC speakers for optimal sound quality. Next, you will find a resources list for today's webinar in the upper right part of your screen. Here we have listed the event program guide for you to download that provides topic and panelist information from each session. At the bottom of your console are multiple widgets you can use. To submit a question, click on the Q&A widget. It may be open already and appear on the left side of your screen. You may submit questions at any time during the during the presentation. However, please note that it is likely that your questions will not be answered until the Q&A portion of the program. Should you experience any technical difficulties during today's program and need assistance, please click on the Help widget, which has a question mark icon and covers common technical issues. And finally, today's program is approved for one HCI SHRM credit hour, so please stay tuned until the end of our program to hear how you can obtain your certificate. Please note that this credit is only available to those who attend the live session and will not be made available to those who watch only the on-demand program. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists. I'd like to welcome Maxine Carrington, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief People Officer at Northwell Health. Also, Amy Claiborne, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at Dartmouth Health. I also want to welcome Vilma Cuvas, who is the AVP Talent Strategy at Nuvance Health. And then also, I'd like to welcome Meredith LaPointe, who is the Chief Business Officer at AMN Healthcare. Thank you all for joining me this afternoon. We're so happy to have you here. Healthcare recruitment is competitive. So how can your organization stay on top? You're going to need flexibility, balance, and planning, which can improve patient care, enable growth, and meet financial imperatives. In our discussion today, we're going to talk about how to leverage technology and take a strategic approach to diversify your organization's recruitment channels. Before we dig into the discussion, I just would like to ask each panelist to tell us a little bit about their organization for context. So Meredith, I'm going to start with you.
Thanks, Erica. First of all, absolute honor to be with this group and such incredible fellow panelists. So thank you for having me today. AMN Healthcare is a healthcare workforce organization that is geared toward really enabling our clients, which are large and small, all providers of healthcare, so all healthcare employers, to really help them manage their total talent in a holistic way. So AMN Healthcare has grown up over several decades to include capabilities around recruitment, around contingent and temporary staff, around language services, just around everything geared to help in such a complicated and critical area for healthcare. So, the biggest thing I would emphasize is our technology first approach, and really excited to hear about what the incredible systems here are doing today, but just the role of technology and the role that it's a big, challenging, crazy problem, but there's some awesome solutions out there. So thanks for having me.
Great, Meredith. Thank you so much. Amy, let's move to you.
Thank you, Erica, and I echo what Meredith said in terms of the honor to work with these panelists today. Dartmouth Health is a system of community hospitals. We have a home health and hospice organization, and we provide healthcare services across New Hampshire and Vermont. We have about 14,000 employees and growing. We have
Mhm.
6 members, and so we're in the rural Northeast. However, I would tell you that since COVID, we've been hiring many employees nationally. So I can't really say that we work in the Northeast anymore, given our remote workforce. But just a pleasure to be here, and look forward to the discussion.
Great, Amy. Maxine, let's hear from you.
Sure, and ditto to all that's been said. Good to connect with everyone. So while I am now a resident of Connecticut, I spend most of my time in New York. That's where I am today with the sun bearing down. Hopefully you all are able to see me.
Yes, yes, oh yes.
So Northwell Health today, talk about incredible growth. We're an integrated healthcare system, primarily based in New York, as I mentioned, but we've got assets and affiliations in multiple states and really in many countries as well. We are the largest private healthcare system in the state, as well as largest private employer. We have a medical school, a research institute, a corporate university, a graduate nursing school, 21 hospitals, over 900 outpatient facilities, home care, skilled nursing, et cetera, really end-to-end continuum. And the other thing I'd add is we're not just not-for-profit today, we're also for-profit, making sure that we're diversifying streams of revenue and that it's feeding the mission side. So lots of joint ventures, a staffing agency, a direct-to-employer a company as well, and so much more. Almost 86,000 team members, 19,000 nurses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and growing, as has been said as well.
Wonderful. Excuse me. Thank you so much, Maxine. There is a lot of diversification for sure at your organization. Thanks for sharing that. Vilma, we'd love to hear about your organization. So I think we're having some audio issue with you, Vilma. We'll come back to you. I definitely want to hear from you. All right, so let's go back to, or let's start with our first question. How have you seen recruitment change across healthcare over the past 5 years? And I'm going to start with Amy on this question.
Thanks, Erica. I think this is a great question because when I was thinking about when you said 5 years, we've actually been in our post-COVID world going on 4 years in 2024, which is just right around the corner here.
Yeah.
And I've just seen such a remarkable change in recruitment in terms of how to diversify our organization when we're thinking about what makes us special, our brand, our value proposition, and also really partnering with operations on how we deliver care and how might we deliver care differently based on what the workforce desires and needs are. So we have more now flexible schedules than we ever have. I mentioned we have a remote workforce. We're an academic medical center that we've been able to recruit during times of COVID completely virtually, which we weren't doing as much of before. And I think from a recruitment perspective, the combination of how we work with leaders to create creative strategies to bring the workforce to us and really describe our value proposition and what differentiates us and our brand is really a shift for us. In addition, we're using more technology than we have over the past 5 years. And given the competitive landscape, I think we've had to be really creative with the mix of how we bring in contingent labor and also hiring people within our roles. So it is not the same as it was, and I think it really shows how quickly we can pivot as a healthcare organization, and I think we're on a trajectory to even doing more with AI and technology, given how the environment's changing and what people actually want from their employer.
Yeah, great. Thanks for starting us off, Amy. That's great. And you definitely touched on some points that we're going to go through today in today's discussion. So thank you for bringing that up. Maxine, how about you? How has recruitment changed across healthcare?
Look, I'd say, and I echo a lot of what was just said, I'd add, I think we've all moved away from the traditional post and pray approach to recruitment. And I
Sure.
think, what was mentioned was the landscape, absolutely even more competitive, when you think about certainly the traditional players, traditional competitors, but also the non-traditional. Everyone's getting into healthcare.
Yeah.
So, right. And
Yeah.
as our organizations evolve, certainly we're hiring for every role from every kind of industry, but everyone's getting into healthcare. And the names of some of these, the brands are iconic. So there's a level of attraction that we're trying to compete with. So it
Sure.
forces you to rethink your own brand and how you show up, certainly as an employer, and how you market and
Yeah.
how creative you are.
Yeah.
I think I'd add, how you activate every team member as a recruiter. We
Mhm.
just started our alumni network this June, and
Mm.
we're activating our alumni to help us with recruitment referrals as well. I'd
Mm.
say a heavier focus on pipeline development. I think every organization is getting stronger in that
Yes.
regard. And I would say data. One, you're looking at candidates as consumers,
Mhm.
as customers, and it gives you a different mindset, trying to understand who they are, what
Mhm.
they're interested in, why they would want to come, right, and how you position yourself in the market to be attractive.
Right.
But then learning the various personas. So one of the things we started this year was just general interest meetings.
Mm.
We said no pressure, no strings attached. Just come learn about our culture. And that's
Mhm.
to get at the persona that maybe is concerned about taking a risk. Maybe they've been with their organization for a few years. They want to step in, but again, without commitment. So just come
Sure.
learn about us, have a conversation. Let's begin a relationship. So I
Wow.
think just again, understanding personas more, using data to really understand the consumer through that lens,
Mhm.
and then adjusting strategy.
I love that idea of people can just, like you said, step in, learn about Northwell Health, and what a different and neat way to recruit or at
Mhm.
least get people interested. So thank you for mentioning that. What a difference from 5 years ago.
By the way, full transparency,
Yes.
we were applying for schools for my son, he's 6 years old. They have general interest meetings and literally just borrowed the concept and applied it in our context, which we
Wow.
do in hashtag HR land. Um,
Wonderful. Wonderful.
so yeah, and it's proving we've had 3 sessions so far, great attendance and really conversion to hire we're seeing.
Excellent. Thank you for bringing that up. Meredith, what are you seeing in the industry? And then we'll go to Vilma.
Great. So many of these themes are prevalent from what I see. The point on the earlier, just huge amount of both competition, but just at scale needs within healthcare workforce right now are larger than they've ever been. Last I checked, there were 1.7 million open positions across U.S. healthcare jobs, and it's the large tech players, it's the retail, it's the health systems, it's payers, it's everyone, and just how do we as an industry, bring more people into that across all of these roles and ensure that the greatest talent is drawn to healthcare is an important one. I loved Maxine's point about engaging early and engaging in a just great general way. At AMN, we work on bringing great talent from across the U.S., but also from international locations
Yes.
into mainly U.S. settings, and just the scale part and also the need for speed are two of the biggest themes we see. Just the vastness of it, the urgency and expediency. We're looking at folks who want to bring someone in within a matter of days sometimes. Weeks to days or months, now it's weeks, even in some of these critical permanent roles. And
Sure.
doing that takes a lot of coordination and a lot of pieces. And then just really quickly, on the candidate side, Amy, what you were saying about just the flexibility and ability to be remote, we're seeing a lot of that demand, not only from the employer side, but from all of our candidates. People are looking for something different, and they're looking for, how does this position, how does my employer play a larger part across my entire career, and how can it feel really personalized? How do you engage people and think through that matching and that meeting them where they are at every step of the way?
Excellent. Thank you for those comments, Meredith. It's true. People are really expecting careers now, and not just a job. And how can I, as that in that role, develop and be developed? So thank you. Great point. Vilma, I'm hoping that your audio is working, and it sounds like it is. So Vilma, could you, before you answer this question, could you just tell us a little bit about your organization?
So Nuvance Health is a healthcare system. We are about 15,000 employees, and we cover New York and Connecticut. We're new. We say we're a new baby. Two different systems came together right before COVID, and then COVID happened. We got very busy with COVID, and we're finally fully integrating. We are 7 hospitals. We are very community focused. So a little bit different than Maxine's side of the house. We're smaller, and our focus really is providing care in the communities. We have quite a few hospitals that are rural, so that always presents a challenge when it comes to recruitment. So we get creative. To answer the question, we get quite creative around how do we get the next generation of healthcare workers interested. As Maxine was saying, I think everybody's experiencing the same situation, which is we're seeing the gap. And as we speak and collaborate with our academic partners, we're seeing that there are less students going into healthcare careers and less people graduating. And then they do graduate, but then they only stay for a year because they realize, well, this is not exactly what I expected, since the industry has changed so much since COVID. So we approach it as we have a responsibility to build the next generation, and we're working with the local schools, and we're going all the way to 7th grade. We're finding that, yes, to engage them, give them experiences, we bring them in, we give them experiences of what a day in the life is, to try to ensure that we connect with them early on. We work with them through the high school years, and we give them experiences where they come after school every day for a semester, and they get to experience different types of careers. And we are encouraging them and working with our academic partners to ensure that then they are getting the education that they need in order to go into a healthcare career, because that's also a challenge, right? So the schools are struggling. So our responsibility, and what we feel is our responsibility, is to provide mentoring, to provide support, to provide the next generation whatever the tools are that they need in order to succeed. And sometimes it's financial, so we provide academic support as well. But I think that everybody's going to start having to do that, because the industry has changed a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you all for just giving us sort of that broad overview of how you're all engaging either the next generation or people who are interested and don't want to make a commitment, but they can learn about it, or just other broad ways, flexible schedules. So really fascinating to see how this has all changed the workforce and staffing solutions. Let's go to our next question. So there are a few here, so we're going to unpack them. But let's start with, how have technologies or analytics tools made an impact on your talent acquisition? So Maxine, let's start with you on that.
Yeah, this is an area, I think much like many, we are absolutely focused on evolving. And we're doing so in the context of a major HR reorganization we're working on. And I would say this to kind of amplify some of the points, this concept of personalization. Yeah. You know, we are restructuring our entire HR function around customers. Wow. So there'll be team member services, people leader services, business leader services, and HR enablement and ops. And the strategy is called Reimagine, Reset, and Elevate. And that elevation piece, you know, we're going hard on talent acquisition for sure. So we've made a lot of strides here, but I think we have a lot of opportunities. So what's happening now? Last week, we launched kind of our first major foray as a function into AI with our digital assistant for our team members. It'll soon be able to do transactions in addition to inquiries. And then from there, we have a use case roadmap focused on TA with robotic process automation, you know, particularly in the onboarding space, save us time. Machine learning, deep learning, you know, we are focus on a skills thing in Oracle. That's going to help us kind of match skills to roles. And then we're on track this year to receive over 700,000 applications. It's not humanly possible with the tech we have to mine that, right? And so there are people we're just missing. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So the ability to use technology to kind of reach in, capture the skills, match the skills to other opportunities, and then serve that up is something we're focused on. So we're not unfortunately mature yet in this space, but we're down path right now and looking to launch certainly in the next few months. And then on candidate experience, we're journey mapping right now, all of the moments that matter. We're looking at apps that'll help with wayfinding for new candidates. We're just making sure they're having, again, a very personal, better experience, and trying to get ahead and anticipate the questions and issues they'd have, and using the technology to respond.
Wow, that's really exciting and
a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, wow. Amy or Vilma, what about your organizations? What are you seeing, within your organizations, and what ways are you using it?
We are actually in a similar state as Maxine. We are looking at rebuilding and building a new CRM ATS, bringing new technology in that gives us the ability to utilize AI, chatbots, the same idea of how can you get the candidates through the process and align with the right position. So we're using AI for that. And our goal is, we have the same issue, not enough people, and we want our people to focus on the business of people, on connecting with the candidates in a deeper level. And I think if we can be successful at using AI to do the tasks, right, and surface the candidates that are the best fit for the roles, then we can use the people to really look at are they the best fit to our culture, because that you can't give to AI, right? So that's the path that we're on. The path that we're on is trying to allow AI to take some of the tasks away from the recruiter, so they can really focus on the people. But we're looking at a go live of February, but so hopefully I'll have a lot more to share after February, but we're building it as we speak.
Great. Well, good luck on that. Amy, what about you?
Yeah, as my colleagues were talking, I was thinking, boy, there's quite a maturity curve here with the technology and how fast things are moving.
Yes.
But I would say we're doing some of the things that Maxine and Vilma highlighted. We also, we utilize our candidate relation management system to keep candidates engaged, using text, which is something, when you talk about that previous question about 10 years ago, we weren't texting as much, but that is becoming very, very popular and easy. In addition to mobile scheduling, so scheduling right with the recruiter, scheduling with the hiring manager. Our recruiters are really hyper focused on the candidate experience. So we have analytics that show time and status, and talk with our recruiters about our service level agreements, not only as a recruiter, but then the hiring manager if there's an interview. And in some cases, we were finding that even some of our hiring managers were having some difficulty just getting the time, because the environment is moving so quickly, especially for many of our roles. People will they expect 24-hour response times. And so we have some positions in our organization where our recruiters actually do the interviewing now and are hiring, as well as spot hiring. And that came through our analytics and looking at our time and status, and how quickly we could get an offer out to individuals. Certainly, some of our licensed professions, but we're not doing that. But we feel like there's something for everybody here. And so how do we utilize these tools to match the candidates to the job?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great. Meredith, and what are you seeing as you talk to organizations about technologies and analytics tools?
The one big theme that probably strikes a nerve for many folks listening is when it comes to technology, the idea of these point solutions can be really painful. So
Sure.
what I'm starting to really, see is how are things pulled together. Maxine gave the example of just the entire system redesign, and Vilma, your program going live in February, same idea. But just how do you connect the various pieces so they're actually working together? The three categories that I sort of think of this whole thing in from a talent acquisition perspective are: first, how we're using technology to predict and plan. A lot of the work that we've been doing is just getting down to the really granular level of how many people do you need? What kind of mix? How do you then start to predict down to the schedule level so that you get it right, so that you don't have, times that feel completely burdened and then times that feel way too light, both for clinical but also non-clinical roles. Then the second bucket we think of is just the matching part. So, the traditional like VMSs of the world, how do you really expand vendor management system to be a giant marketplace to match supply and demand and to give people both options, but use AI and technology to help guide and say, where's the best potential? How do you sort of get ahead of this and how do you speed up the whole process? And then third, this was also mentioned, but for candidates and for employees, we have our version of this is something called AMN Passport. But how does an individual who's going through the application process have everything in one place? And how does that become an easy way to navigate job searches, but also, once they're somewhere, get paid on it. You can, expand your skill sets on it. It can hold your credentials with you through different roles. So just the idea of being so easy to use and having that technology first engagement, I think just also allows managers to, be quickly notified of something. Hey, check in with so-and-so, this happened. Lots of potential. It's really exciting.
Oh, for sure. Thank you for that. One thing that we didn't touch on within this sort of multi-layered question, where are our providers experiencing gaps? We talked about some solutions, but where are some gaps that would be helpful where technology and analytics could fit in? So Maxine, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. And look, I think as you've heard us talk about the things that we're implementing, it's all in response to those gaps.
Yeah, true.
So, and I appreciate what was shared, where we find instances of it working. And so it's everything from the communication, so I don't have a status update right now about where I am in the process. We're working on a dashboard solution, app solution for that. Communication is a big piece. Again, our ability to get through those 700,000, there's no reason all of our roles shouldn't be filled, right? All of our vacancies shouldn't be filled. So the ability at that scale, that size, to get to everyone is so critical. So those are just two I would call out. Okay. There certainly are multiple more. It's not humanly possible, right? A lot of this is still being done manually. Yes. And when you think about our size and scope today, it's just not okay and sustainable. Right. So everything we're doing is really in response to a number of gaps.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Amy, share your what you might experience as pain points.
Yeah, I agree with everything Maxine said because we are all implementing solutions to try to address the speed to hire, the candidate experience, getting people here quicker, faster. I think one thing that we can use technology for, and we have done some of this in my organization, is where's the white space on reasons why people aren't coming to the organization? Is it because of housing? Is it childcare? Is it the nature of our environment doesn't have X amenity that people were expecting, and really understanding that from candidates and developing solutions to solve those things. So for example, I never thought in HR that we would be working on housing and childcare the way we are, even though we have 3 childcare centers. But how do we remove those barriers for candidates to be able to come here? So surveying our existing employees, surveying candidates of why they decline, and using that information to then feed the areas that really matter most to candidates so that we can remove those barriers to entry.
Yeah, very good. And Vilma, what about you?
I agree with what everyone is saying because I think we're all experiencing the exact same challenges. Yeah. We're also looking at the technology for scheduling. And as Meredith mentioned, I think there's an opportunity there because sometimes you're blinded and you can't really see where the gaps are. And then there's a flip side to that. Staff overscheduled, overworked, and it's not easy to be able to capture that and see what they could potentially be burned out. We really need to be looking at not scheduling that person or not asking that person to stay. So we're working on that as well right now, and I think there are so many options in the market of technologies that can help you look at how your staff is scheduled and maximize the schedule, but also allow them some flexibility on how they can pick their shifts, or but also visibility around you need to be watching because this number of staff have already worked too many shifts and could potentially burn out. Because what we're also seeing is that people are burning out and leaving the industry. So how do we help manage that?
Sure. Yep. I have a follow-up question for my 3 providers. You may have mentioned this already. This is all part of kind of this first question, but was just wondering if there was some additional information. What metrics do you track for progress? It might be still too early, but how are you going to measure success? I know Amy talked about speed to hire. Maxine talked about the experience, the person's journey or experience, and I know Amy did too, and Vilma, I'm sure all of those are the same. Are there any other things that you are measuring for success or will be measuring as you use these technologies? And yeah, go ahead.
We are looking at turnover. We're thinking that engagement will improve if we do it well. We believe that your experience through the hiring process determines how long you're going to stay in an organization, or at least that's my sense, or how engaged you're going to be year one. So we're looking at, or we're hoping that this is going to, we're going to be measuring what does our turnover look like, our first year turnover, our 90-day success rate. Is this making an impact? And we're using the technology also to connect with the new hires through that process to give them a way of communicating with us about what's happening within the first year of employment. Because sometimes new employees have a harder time voicing their opinion. We think that the ability, we need to provide them that ability, a place that they can connect with us easily and share their feedback. But we're hoping we're going to see some improvement in turnover.
Okay, great. And Meredith, within the industry, are there certain measures or metrics that you recommend for providers to track?
Oh, we're seeing a lot of just various more granular metrics along the entire sort of from time of interest in a role to time of not start, but establishment almost after that full year. So looking at in a pipeline, are there cancellation or dropout rates? And at what point are they happening? And what does that then tell us about either the process or competing priorities for those individuals? We're looking a lot at, different timing changes that folks may have in preferences. And we're also looking with several of our clients at, in that first onboarding period, what are the metrics we're seeing there for satisfaction, especially satisfaction, and then sort of readiness and confidence in readiness. And I'd actually love to open this up to the group just to say how, with turnover rates still higher than they had been pre-COVID, and maybe that not being a fluke and being something that we will see on a continuing basis given flexibility needs and options out there, how are you dealing with the need to get folks productive quickly, but also the need to really bring people into the family more quickly, because that's such an important point that we're focused quite a bit on.
Meredith, I'm glad you brought up the notion of turnover, because our strategy, especially through COVID, was retention is our recruitment strategy. So we were assessing, and we still do, the health of teams and how employee engagement scores play into team health. And what actions leaders can take to retain employees or move employees around our health system. I mean, we have care environments that are very diverse. So maybe in this particular care environment, someone's seeking something additional or challenging. They can move around and feel like they're actually growing or establishing career ladders, so people see that trajectory. There's a lot that we're doing, and I know others are too, to really demonstrate that you're not going to sit in the same seat for 15 years. And we know gone are the days that people work at organizations for that amount of time. But how do we create our flexibility within our workforce, and help keep people engaged throughout that continuum? Yeah.
Any other response to Meredith's question?
Yeah, it's everything that's been said, and that micro aspect is so important, just to be capturing all the insights. Even on the exit survey, it's everything that's been said. Why are they leaving? First year retention for us was an issue before the pandemic. It was exacerbated. Our overall turnover never went up that high, thankfully, and it's since stabilized. But first year was, and so we developed, task forces across the organization. And so at every site, particularly in the hospitals, there is a task force. We gave them flexibility, name it what you will, be creative, right? And it's focused. But here are the insights. Here's the data to show you where we're seeing higher turnover in certain roles. Let's deep dive on why. We created playbooks for leaders to be able to, have the stay interviews very early, particularly in nursing. That was a great partnership to be getting the insights and responding. The other thing we did was we made first year retention a compensated metric for our executives as part of their short-term bonus program for this year. So that certainly increased enrollment and buy-in in really prioritizing it. And I'm so grateful, we're starting to see turnover coming down in that first year again, where it was a huge issue. Yeah.
Great. Vilma, I want to give you the opportunity to respond, and if you're all set, we can move on to the next question.
I agree. I think we are all trying out the same things and focusing on the same thing. I think internal mobility is the key. It's either going to break or make us as organizations, because the new generation wants to move and wants to have different experiences and different careers within the life cycle of a career. And we're trying to ensure that we have that they see us as, I can try a different career, but still stay within the same organization. I can try a different environment, still stay within the same organization. And we're putting a lot of focus on that, because we think that gone are the years, as Amy said, that people stay in an organization forever. They want to have new challenges. We want them to find those challenges here. We want them to find those new careers with us. We are focusing a lot on micro-credentialing, allowing people to learn new skills while still on in their current roles, based on what are their interests for the future, to make sure that we are aligning and capturing that. This is where the data and the technology is great, to be able to capture what other credentials does someone have. So when we are looking to fill a position, instead of going to the external market, looking at our already internal talent, because sometimes it's not that obvious that somebody has an extra skill or got an extra certification in something outside of maybe the typical role. So there might be a nurse that's interested in technology, or is interested in administration, or interested in accounting or something else. And how are we capturing that and ensure that we're bringing them into the temple?
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of these different ways of being an employee. So we have permanent, contingent, and per diem. Are there differences in the way that you deal with these separate groups using tech, and what is that process like? So Maxine, let's go to you first.
Yeah, sure. As I mentioned earlier, we stood up a staffing agency. It was birthed out of HR a few years ago. It's several years now in existence. They meet our internal needs, but they also have a commercial arm that provides staffing for non-competitor companies. And so they manage, all things contingent for us, including, when, in those God forbid situations, we're doing strike planning, for example. That's just the reality. About 28% of our workforce is represented. They're managing those relationships for us. And so they really become the central owner of that. And they're our predominant staffing agency, though we'll contract out if we need to, but we've tried to reduce dependency as much as possible on the external. So on the internal side, they manage the moonlighting arrangements. So we allow many team members in the organization to moonlight in some of our other sites with some guardrails put in place.
Sure.
They, again, also, they've got a contract option as well. So, kind of 6-week or longer contract arrangements. And they definitely relying on technology. They've got a workforce about 5,000 people signed up. And then we started alum staff, which was adjacent to the alumni network. And that allows former team members who've left to now do gig work for us through the flex staff. And we've got about 500 folks signed up since we launched in June. So that's kind of the program, but certainly there was a homegrown thing we created called Clarence years ago to help manage. They're evolving and getting more sophisticated for sure. I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's much better today for staffing, scheduling, et cetera.
Yeah, sure. Wonderful. Amy, what about your organization?
So we too established an internal agency, but it's nowhere near what Maxine is doing in terms of how much hers has grown over the years. But we do service our health system with our internal agency. We started with nursing, and then after COVID, we actually implemented this, and it's being piloted in one of our organizations to expand for service workers. So that might be environmental services or food and nutrition, because those tend to be higher areas that we need to recruit, and the flexibility of that staff is really key. So we have an internal agency. We also have several float pools. Right now we're attaching our current scheduling system to our contingent labor system, so that if we think about this as sort of a three-legged stool, how do we maximize our current, and we take nursing, for example, maximize our current workforce before we go out and get contingent labor. And then if we have contingent labor, we attach that to our recruitment, whether it be making sure that we have an open requisition for that position, or if we can move that contract around at various locations to maximize the use as we are able to fill those positions. That dynamic ensures that we're not bringing in more contingent labor than we actually need. And I would tell you, this is really essential that we do this review now, because before COVID, we always had traveling staff, but as we all know, that was magnified under COVID. So we utilize analytics to ensure that those relationships are being maintained, and then we're being financial stewards of the organization while meeting the increase in patient demand, which I think we're all experiencing right now.
Absolutely. Meredith, what are you seeing as well overall? What are you hearing from your clients?
So first, I love the messages around people leaning into this level and need for flexibility across the workforce. It's such an important part. I think as you think about the power behind having, what may have traditionally been called your core staff, or your perm full and part-times, and then your per diems, which you can think of as more gig-like, and then this idea of flow pools and internal agencies, and then, the external fill in the blanks when you need it. There's just so much power to that. I really do view that embracing of flexibility, and what we've seen across the industry is providers who've embraced that have actually recovered more quickly on a financial perspective, they have better access for patients. They're meeting satisfaction and demands of their employees and folks who are working with them more effectively. So I think just the entire lean in concept is such an important one. I think as you do think about sort of the combination there, I do go back to planning and saying, what should this look like, and how do you intentionally use those different pieces of your, flexibility puzzle? I think that's a really cool, new, great area that lets you not only figure out, how many people to hire, but also what would it look like if you did want to offer, call it a mini sabbatical program for folks who've been with you for 3 years, or a different kind of, breaks for people if they are experiencing burnout. How could you backfill that appropriately and effectively? What if you are opening a new hospital or expanding services? How does that play out in month 1 versus month 8? And how do you really get that right along the entire journey? I also think that technology, connecting all of those is so important. We partner with a lot of our clients actually on their own internal float pools and agencies from a tech perspective, because not everyone has, the CapEx and capabilities to go build everything themselves. So I think also knowing when to partner and how to do that in a way that just really helps advance goals is so cool. What a wonderful time to be, in healthcare talent.
Absolutely. Great. And Vilma.
So we're in the early stages of some of the things that everyone is already doing, but you are correct about the flexibility. And I love Meredith saying embrace and lean into the flexibility. One of the things we are focusing on is that untapped talent, right? We know during COVID, a lot of the female population or the women had to stay home and take care of their kids and not ready to come back 100%, for example. And in healthcare, we know it's a woman-run world, and we need to have that flexibility. And our schedules don't normally have that flexibility. We have an 8-hour shift, a 10-hour shift, a 12-hour shift, right? That has been the traditional way of doing things. And we're looking at, well, how do we change that? How do we allow for shifts that are shorter for that nurse that wants to work the 5 hours where the kids are in school and then be able to go home and pick up their kids after school. So we are looking at how do we create those extra shifts in between, and you need technology to be managing that because obviously you can't leave the shift empty after she leaves at 2 o'clock. You still have patients that need to be seen. So we're looking at how do we use technology to help us figure out, okay, what do we need? Do we need somebody that works 5 hours? And do we need somebody that can then work another 5 hours to make a full shift? And to allow people to have that flexibility, or they can only work 2 days and can't commit to a full 3 or 5 day schedule. I think is key because everyone's looking for more flexibility, and we're missing out on a lot of talent because our schedules are so strict.
Yeah, great point, Vilma. Well, I'm just looking at our time here. So let's go to our last question, and then we'll transition to Q&A portion of our panel. How have approaches to workplace planning changed with more insights and analytics available to health systems than ever before? So, Amy, let's start with you.
Yeah, when I think about workforce planning, I think of proactive planning of what's the workforce needs of today and tomorrow. This is not a passive recruitment scenario, right? And having analytics around the gap that we're seeing between people leaving healthcare or those that are retirement eligible by department, by unit, and what the new entrants to healthcare look like, whether that be a pipeline that you're building yourself. Like for us, we have a career school where we're building many technical programs, or how we get other people into healthcare from other industries that they may not thought of that, or how we use technology to leverage positions, right? I think we all knew the bubble was sort of coming. I think we've been in it, but it's certainly getting to the time where, we're seeing such a gap between available workforce and those leaving that workforce planning is more important than it ever has been.
Great. Maxine.
Yeah.
Sure. I just wrote down career school. I love that concept, learning from all of you. So definitely on the predictive piece, I think about in healthcare, particularly the seasonal aspect. We know there are seasons where we're going to see the workforce impacted by flu, impacted by COVID now, right? The vacation time. So if we can look back and see that trend and look back and see the patterns, now we can start to predict, which is some of what we do now, for sure, predict what we believe our staffing needs are going to be and how we meet those needs, whether it is through contingent, whether it's through, permanent hiring, knowing to, open up X number of requisitions and not be caught off guard. And I think our team is really doing better with that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is the infrastructure, who's in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a stronger infrastructure today. We have a system workforce planning meeting that meets monthly where we talk anything that could impact that pipeline of talent, right people,
Yeah.
right place, right time. But then there are also local monthly meetings happening as well at a local level, and then ultimately feeding up. The other piece I would say is the AI advantage, right? We know we've got to start now, speaking of prediction, looking at all of our roles and trying to predict for our organizations what roles are going to be augmented potentially by AI, what roles may be replaced by AI, right? And everyone, of course, will be using it. And so how we develop and train the workforce to continue to use those more tools, because they're technically using it today, they may not realize it, but more of the tools. But I think that piece is going to be key.
Great. Thank you. Vilma.
I agree. I think AI is going to make life better for everyone. And then the question is, how do we embrace it and how do we get people prepared? The role of the healthcare worker is going to change, and we need to prepare them for that. And we need, as an organization, start looking at, as Maxine said, what does the workforce of the future look like, and how do we start building for that workforce? And how do we start giving our employees those tools and those credentials that they will need, or the training that they will need to be able to be successful as their jobs are changing around them. I think there's an opportunity there. There's also how the patient and the staffing volumes can impact based on different times of the year. And I think, how do we schedule accordingly to what our patient volume is, rather than scheduling because this is our schedule? We could utilize AI for that in a very effective way, a technology in a very effective way. But it's a changing world and a fast changing world. And I think we as healthcare organizations also have to kind of step back and look at, well, what's the overall impact and how do we ensure we embrace it in a responsible way?
Absolutely. Yeah. That could be a whole other conversation too, as far as ethics and compliance. And so that will be another Workforce Now Summit that we'll delve into. Meredith, I want to give you the last, sort of the wrapping up point before we transition over to our Q&A. But I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to about a minute and a half or so.
I'll talk quickly. Just repeating mostly what has been said on the workforce planning side. To me, AI and technology enables us to take a whole lot more pieces of data at a far more granular level and get really great specific insights. Scheduling systems that we see are in a 90-day prediction window, getting down to 96 to 98% perfect accuracy on the staffing model. And as we evolve the staffing model, it's going to be a whole lot easier to be able to put that information in and get even better outcomes. So it's certainly a multi-pronged process, but there's endless possibility.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, thank you all for an awesome discussion. We are going to transition over to a Q&A for our audience. So let me move the slide over to that. And just wanted to let the audience know that, as a reminder, to submit a question, click on the Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen. It might be open already, but please note that your questions will remain anonymous and will not be viewable by other audience members. There is a question that has come in about, we had talked about nursing and scheduling for nurses, but for example, do certain types of talent have higher or lower flexibility expectations that you've found? For example, do nurses want more flexibility versus allied or non-clinical? So anyone want to take that question? Why don't we ask Maxine?
Sure. Look, I wouldn't, again, as I mentioned, we have 19,000 nurses. When you think about our workforce demographics, over 50% are Gen Y, Gen Z today. And so you don't want to generalize, but there might be some differing expectations. And then we're 72% female. Our nursing population is about 13% male. And I'm mentioning all of those because that informs a sense of life responsibility often, but we're seeing even shifts in that, more men taking parental leave, right, than we've seen in the past. So I guess the overarching answer is it depends on where people are in life and what their needs are. And I would say a lot of the legacy behaviors and beliefs and expectations we saw are just not existing anymore. Everything's changing on us, right? So I don't think it depends on a role. It depends on a person and where they are. That's our experience. I'm not sure if others are seeing something different.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I agree. I think that regardless of profession, people are dealing with the same issues at home. And so that may command a different flexibility, or I do think some of the expectations around remote work in healthcare are things that are testing the healthcare environment for certain positions. But certainly, as we know, our nurses and allied health professionals are not able to do that, right? So what are the flexible shifts and ways we can support them? But I agree with Maxine. It really depends on the circumstance.
I wanted to ask a kind of a follow-up question to we've been talking about sort of the early engagement, but I was interested to know for the audience, once you've hired talent and then have helped them start their careers and then start to engage them in developing that career, are there ways that you've already used technology or data analytics to identify some high potential leaders to continue that experience? Just curious if any one of you have that insight on that. Yeah, go ahead.
I can speak. It's a little bit outside of just pure healthcare context, but at AMN, we do a lot of rotational leadership as folks are growing up and developing within our organization. And it's something where, where I've seen it also on the provider side, it's been quite successful. I talk all the time about folks who we may place in entry-level positions and what is your entire career trajectory and potential look like? What do you want to do? And how does that go back to the persona point about what kind of flexibility are people looking for? What kind of job opportunities are people looking for also? And how do you learn those early and check in often to see how they're evolving? I love seeing, executive teams who have several members who did grow up within organizations. I think it's such an incredible testament to their understanding of what their mission is and how they're going to get there.
Thank you for that point. Yeah, I was just curious because it's kind of neat to see, the whole career path and how technology can be used for that. So thank you for that example. We are sadly running out of time. I wanted to see if you all could maybe do a 30-second one takeaway that you'd like to leave with the audience from today's discussion. Vilma, I'm going to start with you.
I would say, be open, explore the possibilities. You can always pivot. Don't restrict yourself based on what we have done in the past. Get creative and give it a try. If it doesn't work, you could always pivot.
Great. Okay, Amy.
I would say be creative and be innovative and don't shy away from the technology that's coming out. I think it's moving so fast that if we don't start embracing it, we'll be behind pretty quickly. And so I would say that. And then I would also say that it must be coupled with an inclusive culture and work that you're doing for your value proposition. That is something that AI probably could write for you, but isn't necessarily going to give you the feels within the organization that will retain and attract people to you.
Thank you. Maxine.
I would agree with everything that's been said. Study your folks with you or not with you to everything that's, been discussed today, capturing the insights, listening. And I would say, contemplate who's in the room, who's not in the room to the comment about inclusion, certainly, and activate your entire workforce to be your recruiters. and your ambassadors.
Great. And we'll wrap it up with Meredith.
Thanks, Erica. Embrace flexibility, embrace creativity, and I think more dialogue and collaboration just like this. This is such a massive challenge across healthcare, and I think the more great systems and leaders partner together to help solve it, whether we're talking to folks earlier in their careers in junior high school or helping shape and paint the picture of what incredible careers in healthcare can look like, it's going to take all of us.
It's true.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again. It was such a pleasure having this discussion with all of you. That is all the time we have today. I just want to mention, as I did in the introduction, today's program is approved for one HCI SHRM credit hour to those who attended today's live session. Emails will be sent out with this information to all live attendees within 24 to 48 hours following the conclusion of today's event. I want to thank our panelists for an excellent conversation and our sponsor, AMN Healthcare, for making this program possible. And finally, thank you to you, the audience, for participating today. Over the past several hours, we have heard from healthcare HR experts and our sponsor about key strategies for tackling the needs of the healthcare workforce. And we hope this educational summit will help set your organization up for success. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for joining us. Take care.